if I were to compare the different types of layer 1 physical media for Ethernet, things we're dealing with today, I could break it out into a chart like this. So what we're seeing here is everything from the lowest end speed of Ethernet of 10 base T. So if you break out that name there, it's a 10 megabit Ethernet. It's baseband as opposed to broadband, which is the terminology would be best put. Baseband, we have a single connection communicating over the wire. As opposed to broadband, there are multiple conversations communicating over the wire. For instance, cable networks and DSL would be considered broadband. DSL is broadband because you've got a voice channel, a transmit and receive paths for voice, and you have a different frequency for data traversing over that same pair of copper wires. Where cable would break it out based on frequency. You have in the United States NTSC-based coaxial cable for television access at home, which breaks out 135 channels based on a 6 megahertz wide channel on a per channel basis. But then you can use additional bandwidth available past that to carry data. So the idea of baseband, Ethernet runs in a baseband technology, or broadband where there's multiple channels communicating information across that same wire. All right, so the first number in Ethernet is the speed of the Ethernet technology, then the word base for baseband, because it's all baseband for Ethernet, and then the actual connector type we're going to use within Ethernet. So if it's a T, what they're talking about is unshielded twisted pair, which we'll talk about how those wires actually break out here in the next couple slides. So 10 base T, 10 megabit baseband with a RJ45 untwisted pair type connector. All right, all the way up to, say, 1,000 based LX, which is using 9 micron single mode fiber connection. The LX identifies that connector. Well, one thing missing from the example here is ZX, which is the long range fiber optic connection for gigabit Ethernet. And I also didn't put the specs here for 10 gigabit Ethernet, but you get the idea of the requirements that Cisco is going to expect you to know as far as the different types of physical media for Ethernet. Another thing that's important to understand here is the length of the cables. If you're dealing with unshielded twisted pair, you're talking about 328 feet or 100 meters for the overall length of the cable. Now be careful with this because if you're actually engineering this, what you've got to take into account is it's the actual card-to-card communication here can't be more than 100 meters, which means if it's plugged into a switch port, that port right there, the other end of the cable is 100 meters. If it's going through a patch panel, you've got to add in the patch cable there, going from the Ethernet port of the switch to the patch panel, from the patch panel through the distribution frame of the building you're in to the wall jack. From the wall jack, how long is the cable from there to my actual PC? End to end, that has to be less than 100 meters. And this is a key thing that you're going to need to know, from a standpoint of being a network engineer, that 100 meters can't be broken. You go over it, you're going to run into big problems. And from a standpoint of a test, you're definitely going to get this question asked of you, from Cisco. If you're dealing with fiber, those numbers can change depending on the type of fiber you're running. Whether it's single mode or multi-mode fiber will depend on the number of miles or simply meters you get for a particular connection. For instance, FX goes 400 meters. You go to SX, you're talking about 550 meters. You start getting into LX and ZX, you're going upwards of 10 kilometers. Start dealing with ZX, and you have hot laser type stuff where they've got warning labels on the actual cable saying, don't point this at your eye because it's hot laser and it's actually shooting lasers instead of LEDs through the actual fiber optic cable. Nothing like giving yourself self-imposed LASIK surgery. So, and of course the different connector types. When you're dealing with the fiber optic connectors, or in the 10x base T connectors are normally RJ45 ISO 8877 connectors.